All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling a topic that's both fascinating and a little bit, well, terrifying.
Hmm.
Earthquakes.
Yeah, definitely a force of nature that commands respect.
We're going deep with the power of earthquakes, understanding their impact and the strongest quakes in history. Lots to unpack here.
Absolutely. From the science behind them to the impact they have on us and, well, the planet as a whole.
Exactly. So let's start with the basics. We know these massive tectonic plates are constantly moving beneath us.
Right. It's like a giant slow motion puzzle, but the pieces are huge slabs of the Earth's crust.
And sometimes those pieces get stuck. Right. Causing a buildup of pressure.
Yeah, exactly, along fault lines. And that pressure eventually has to be released, leading to, well, you guessed it, an earthquake.
Okay, so that's the earthquake part. But why is the damage so different from one to the next? Like one 7.0 barely rattles the windows and another 6.0 levels a city.
It's a great question, and it shows why simply looking at magnitude isn't enough. The depth of the earthquake, where that initial rupture happens, plays a huge role.
So a shallower earthquake, even if it's a bit weaker, can cause more damage on the surface.
Exactly. Think of it like dropping a pebble in a pond versus chucking a boulder. The impact's different depending on how deep it goes.
Makes sense. So depth is key. What else?
The type of ground the seismic waves travel through matters. Some rock formations are better at absorbing that energy than others.
Huh. Hadn't thought about the ground itself being a factor.
Oh, it's a big one. And of course, how close that epicenter is to populated areas.
Right, obviously. The closer, the worse.
Absolutely. Then you add in how buildings are built, the infrastructure, so many variables come into play.
Okay, so magnitude, depth, location, and ground composition all contribute to the recipe for disaster. But what about the damage itself? What are we talking about here?
Well, beyond collapsed buildings, there can be landslides, ruptured gas lines, which can lead to fires. Transportation systems get disrupted. Essential services like water and electricity can be knocked out. And of course, if it happens underwater,
Tsunamis. Those are terrifying. The idea of an earthquake causing this giant wave that can travel across oceans.
they really highlight how interconnected our planet is.
You mentioned those essential services too. It's not just the immediate damage, it's that loss of clean water, healthcare, communication. It can be long-lasting.
Exactly. Disruption to everyday life can be immense, and recovery can take years, even decades in some cases.
It's like a domino effect. One event triggers a chain of consequences. But earlier you mentioned how some ground is better at absorbing shock waves. What if we could build structures that do that too?
That's a hot area of research right now. Engineers are developing new technologies and techniques to make structures more earthquake resistant.
So buildings that can sort of roll with the punches.
You got it. Controlling how a structure responds to those seismic waves so it doesn't just collapse.
That's reassuring. It's great to know people are working on that.
And it's not just about the materials, it's also about understanding the geology and choosing building sites carefully.
So location, location, location applies to earthquakes too. It's not just a real estate thing.
It's crucial. Avoiding fault lines, unstable ground, areas prone to liquefaction, where the ground basically turns to quicksand during an earthquake.
Okay, good to know. All this talk about building safety makes me think about those historical earthquakes, the ones that really shaped our understanding of these events.
Right. Each one has a story to tell, not just of destruction, but of what we've learned and how we've adapted.
Exactly. So where should we start?
Well, why not start with the big one, the record holder for a most powerful earthquake ever recorded? The 1960 Valdivia earthquake in Chile.
Ah, yes, the big one. Take us back to 1960. What happened?
Okay, picture this. May 22nd, 1960. The southern coast of Chile gets rocked by a magnitude 9.5 earthquake. That's like the energy of 1,000 atomic bombs.
Wow, that's a powerful image. So what happened next?
Well, the shaking was felt across all of South America, even as far as Hawaii and Japan. Buildings crumbled, landslides, the landscape was permanently changed.
And I'm guessing this is where the tsunami comes in. A quake that big, underwater, it had to create a monster wave.
You're right. A massive tsunami radiated out from the Chilean coast, reaching heights of up to 82 feet in some places.
82 feet, that's like a seven-story building. I can't even imagine.
It swept across the Pacific, causing damage in Hawaii, Japan, even the Philippines, thousands of miles away.
So one event, this one earthquake, triggered a chain of destruction across the entire Pacific.
It really shows how interconnected our world is. And the Valdivia earthquake wasn't just destructive, it spurred huge advances in understanding plate tectonics, tsunamis, and early warning systems.
Like even from tragedy comes an opportunity to learn. What other historical earthquakes have shaped our understanding?
Let's fast forward a few decades and talk about the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami.
This is the one that hit off the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia. I remember the news footage. It was heartbreaking.
Yes, December 26, 2004, magnitude between 9.1 and 9.3. While slightly smaller than Valdivia, it caused a far greater human toll.
Over 230,000 lives lost. It's difficult to even grasp a number like that.
The tsunami waves, some over 100 feet high, swept across the Indian Ocean, impacting Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, Thailand, so many countries. Entire coastal communities just gone.
What's striking about this one is the speed, how little warning there seemed to be.
Yeah. The lack of a good early warning system in the Indian Ocean at the time was a major factor in the high number of deaths. The waves traveled so fast, some coastlines had minutes, mere minutes, before impact.
It underscores how crucial those warning systems are.
Absolutely. And thankfully, this event did lead to a lot of investment in tsunami research, early warning systems, and global disaster preparedness efforts.
It's like in the face of such tragedy, the need to learn and prevent future devastation.
Definitely. And unfortunately, this wasn't the last major earthquake to teach us these hard lessons. In 2011, another powerful one struck, this time off the coast of Japan.
The Tushoku earthquake and tsunami. I remember that one. Another stark reminder of nature's power.
It was a magnitude 9.0, triggering a massive tsunami that devastated coastal areas of Japan. Over 15,000 lives were lost.
And this one also had the added layer of the Fukushima nuclear disaster.
Exactly. The tsunami waves overwhelmed the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, causing a meltdown and the release of radioactive material. It was a triple threat: earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear disaster, all intertwined.
Makes you really think about those cascading effects, one event leading to another and another. But even with such tragedy, there were stories of human resilience and innovation.
Absolutely. The Japanese people showed incredible strength in rebuilding, and the Fukushima disaster led to a global reassessment of nuclear safety and a push for more resilient energy systems.
It's like even in the darkest moments, you see that spark of human ingenuity and determination.
It's always there, a constant in the face of these events.
So I've talked about Chile in 1960, the Indian Ocean in 2004, and Japan in 2011. Any other historic earthquakes that stand out to you?
Let's shift focus to North America. The 1964 Alaska earthquake, the strongest ever recorded on the continent.
The Alaska earthquake. I have to admit, I don't know much about that one.
March 27th, 1964, Good Friday. A magnitude 9.2 earthquake hit Prince William Sound in Alaska. It was so powerful that it caused the ground to rupture for hundreds of miles. Some areas were lifted by as much as 30 feet, others dropped by several feet.
30 feet, that's like 3 stories. Can't even picture it.
It was a truly earth-shattering event. Thankfully, it happened in a less populated area, which limited the loss of life. But the damage was still extensive, and the tsunami caused destruction along the Pacific coast of North America.
Incredible that one event can alter the landscape so drastically.
The Alaska earthquake gave scientists so much data. It refined their understanding of plate tectonics, fault mechanics, and how tsunamis are generated. New building codes and engineering practices emerged to make structures safer.
It seems like every major earthquake, as tragic as they are, adds another piece to the puzzle. Helps us build a better picture.
Exactly. Each one is a learning opportunity to refine our knowledge, improve preparedness, and strengthen our resilience.
Speaking of learning, there's one more historic earthquake I'd like to hear about. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake. It's etched in history for its impact on the city.
Ah, yes. While not as powerful as some we've discussed, it's a perfect example of how a moderate earthquake, combined with secondary effects like fire, can cause massive damage.
The firestorm that followed is what's always fascinated me. It seemed to cause as much, if not more, damage than the earthquake itself.
It did. The earthquake, magnitude 7.9, struck on April 18, 1906, causing significant damage. But the fires that erupted afterward really devastated the city.
I've read accounts of people describing the whole city looking like one giant bonfire, just chaos and terror.
It was. Ruptured gas lines and water mains fueled the flames and made it almost impossible for firefighters to control them. Those fires burned for 3 days, destroying over 28,000 buildings. Over 250,000 people were left homeless.
It shows that the impact goes way beyond the shaking itself. The after effects, the fires, tsunamis, landslides, they could be even more devastating.
Exactly. And the San Francisco earthquake was a harsh lesson in fire safety, resilient infrastructure, and the importance of community preparedness.
We've covered some of the most significant earthquakes in history. each one a story of destruction and resilience, and this constant quest to understand these forces of nature.